It was the kind of morning when the silence in the kitchen felt louder than anything the coffee machine could hum. She sat at the counter, scrolling her phone, legs crossed like she was waiting for something more interesting to happen. I poured the last of the coffee into her mug, even though she hadn't looked up since I walked in. There was a time when she'd meet my eyes before I said a word. Now it felt like I was a background actor in a scene she didn't care to direct anymore. I slid the mug in front of her, then leaned against the opposite counter. "You working late again tonight?" I asked, trying to keep things light. She glanced up briefly, then backed down. "Probably. Depends." It wasn't an honest answer, but I let it go. I'd been letting a lot of things go lately. The size, the way she recoiled from casual touches, the edge in her voice when I asked about her day. It was like living with someone who used to be my wife, but now only wore her skin like a uniform she was tired of. I reached for the grocery list magnetized to the fridge. "We're out of eggs. You want me to pick up dinner too?" That's when she said it. "You're lucky I haven't walked out yet." She didn't shout it. It just dropped from her lips like it was a truth she'd been nursing for weeks, maybe longer, waiting for the perfect time to release it. No emotion, just a line, tossed out like weather commentary. The pen in my hand hovered above the list. I looked at her fully now. Her gaze remained fixed on whatever video she was watching, utterly unaffected by the weight of what she'd just dropped between us. It didn't come after an argument. We weren't fighting. There hadn't been a shouting match or betrayal. It was a quiet morning with toast crumbs on the counter and sunlight on the hardwood floors, and she decided to punctuate the air with that sentence. I let the silence stretch between us, not to make a scene, just to see if she'd realize what she'd said, how deeply it cut, but nothing. She sipped her coffee, thumb still flicking on the screen. So I nodded, just once. Then I walked to the coat rack by the door, unhooked the light gray trench she always wore when she wanted to look casually superior to everyone around her. I brought it back, laid it gently over the back of the chair next to her. She glanced up, confused for the first time. "What are you doing?" she asked, brows lifting slightly. I tilted my head toward the front door. "Then don't let luck run out." Her phone slipped from her hand onto the counter. That startled her more than anything else. For a second, she stared at me like I'd just spoken a language she didn't recognize. "You're not serious," she said, the edge creeping in. "I'm exactly as serious as you are." She blinked. It was a figure of speech. I gave a short, humorless chuckle. "No, it was a confession. You didn't say it to be dramatic. You said it because you believe it. You've been saying a version of it in every sigh, every eye roll, every time you pull away like I'm a burden." She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "I don't need an apology. You don't mean. I don't want a half-hearted justification. You said what you said. You're free to follow that thought wherever it takes you." For a moment, she looked around the room like she'd never seen it before, like she was suddenly aware of how her tone had settled into every corner of this house. The air between us was no longer just cold. It was made of glass. Brittle, dangerous, and already starting to crack. "You're overreacting," she tried, her voice wavering now. I leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. "No, I'm reacting. For the first time in too long." I could see it unsettle her. This version of me that wasn't trying to fix things, wasn't looking for compromise. She was expecting silence, maybe a retreat into the usual routine. Instead, I handed her clarity. She stood slowly, the coat still untouched. Her hand brushed past it, but didn't grab it. "You're trying to call my bluff?" she said finally. "If it's a bluff, it's not mine." The room stayed still for several seconds. The kind of stillness that follows a door slammed shut or a vase knocked off a shelf. A silence that marks the moment before everything changes. "I have a meeting," she muttered, finally reaching for her coat. "We'll talk later." "If you walk out now," I said, not moving, "it won't be a pause. You don't get to treat this like a power play and expect the same life waiting on the other side." She hesitated in the doorway, but she didn't look back. And just like that, she stepped outside. Not with rage, just the quiet resolve of someone who believed they still held control of the narrative. I stayed where I was, listening to the door click shut behind her. But something else had closed too. And this time, I wasn't the one begging it to stay open. The sound of her heels tapping down the walkway stayed in my ears long after she disappeared from view. I stood in the center of the kitchen, surrounded by the familiar clutter of a morning that had already shifted into something unrecognizable. Her coffee mug still sat where she'd left it, half full, a faint lipstick mark smudged near the rim. For a moment, I stared at it like it might explain something. Why the woman I married had grown so casual with contempt. Then I reached over, poured it down the sink, and ran water until the last trace of her exit washed away. I did not attempt to stop her, and more importantly, I had no urge to. What she'd expected, what women like her friends had probably told her would happen, was a panic. A flurry of apologies. A trail of breadcrumbs she could follow back when she got bored of proving a point. Instead, I picked up my laptop, opened our shared banking dashboard, and began to work. First, the password. Reset, secured, and logged. Then came the secondary email account she always used when ordering from luxury brands, the one she thought I hadn't noticed. I disabled her access to the joint cards, flagged the spending alerts, and set limits where they hadn't existed before. Nothing vengeful. If she wanted freedom, she'd finance it herself. The screen blinked with confirmation emails while I sipped coffee from a clean mug, the one she always said was too plain. Every click felt like another unspoken response to that morning's declaration. If I were so fortunate to have her presence, then perhaps she could experience what life looked like without the comforts that presence had been costing. By lunchtime, I'd changed the Netflix and Amazon Prime credentials. The Spotify account reverted to a solo plan. She liked to think those things were insignificant, just background perks of modern marriage. But suddenly, the background would get very quiet. A message buzzed on my phone around 2 in the afternoon. It was from her. Made it to Liz's. We'll talk later. I need space to think. The tone was rehearsed, calm on the surface, but underneath, the signal was clear. She was expecting control to remain hers. She assumed I'd pace the floors, waiting for her to process, like I always had. I typed back, "Take all the time you need." Then I muted the thread and returned to work. The quiet that followed surprised me. It felt comfortable. For the first time in months, maybe years, there wasn't tension radiating from the other room. No forced small talk, just a peaceful hum, the low spin of the dryer in the hallway, and my breath, even and steady. That evening, I reheated leftovers and ate alone. No grand statement. Just me, my dinner, and the luxury of clarity. As I scraped the last of the pasta from the plate, another text came through. "Did you log me out of the bank app?" I wiped my mouth, leaned back, and stared at the phone, just the first chip in the facade. I replied, "You said you needed distance. Consider it a line drawn with respect." She didn't answer right away. I watched the screen pulse with the typing bubble, disappear, then return. Her mind was probably racing, trying to figure out how this situation had veered off script. She thought I'd be devastated. Instead, I was reorganizing my side of the house and sleeping better than I had in weeks. The next day, I woke up to an email notification. She'd tried to change the Apple ID password. The request failed, of course, because I had already severed the shared links. Music, calendars, saved photos from trips she barely remembered but always liked posting about. Those, too, were now beyond her reach. By Wednesday, she called. I let it ring. Then another message came. "This isn't how mature couples handle conflict. Can we talk?" There it was, the pivot. She'd left expecting to control the tempo of this new dynamic, like a conductor who assumes the orchestra will wait. But this orchestra wasn't playing her symphony anymore. The silence she thought would torment me had become my soundtrack for healing. Later that night, I found myself reorganizing the garage. I hadn't touched it in months, mostly because she always mocked the idea of sorting tools when a professional could be paid to do it. But something about the quiet, the focus, it reminded me that I still had things of value, projects worth pursuing, a version of myself that existed outside her approval. That weekend, a mutual friend reached out, Ryan, someone who usually steered clear of drama. He mentioned, carefully, that she'd been staying at Liz's but seemed restless. I knew what that meant. She was cycling. First, the grand departure, then the emotional high, now the discomfort of unreciprocated attention. "She thought you'd show up," Ryan added, after a pause. "Tell her to stop waiting," I said. "I'm not coming." He whistled quietly. "Damn. Yeah," I said, half to myself. That's what happens when someone finally listens to what's really being said. That night, as I closed the blinds, another message appeared. "We need to meet. Please." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I turned it off. Let her feel the silence. Let her sit with the echo of her own words. By the start of the next week, I could sense the shift wasn't just happening between the two of us. It was rippling out into the network she had built around her. The silence from her phone had grown long, but the voices around her were likely growing louder. It was late Monday afternoon when I saw the name Kara flash on my screen. One of her closest confidants, the loudest one during social events, always with a drink in hand and a comment sharp enough to draw blood. I didn't pick up. There were no missed connections here. They weren't reaching out to reconcile, they were probing, trying to find out why the leash she thought she had around my neck had suddenly vanished. She texted after the missed call, "Hey, just wondering if we could chat. Off the record." I stared at the message for a while, debating. Part of me was curious, the other cautious. Eventually, I sent back, "About what?" No response came that night. I already knew what was happening. My wife had stepped off a cliff, confident that the wind of entitlement would carry her midair. What she failed to account for was gravity. And now, the people who egged her on were watching her fall, unsure whether to cheer or disappear. The next day, I got a message from someone I hadn't expected, Rachel, the quieter friend, the one who always seemed to avoid eye contact during couple gatherings. She was my wife's university roommate, loyal to a fault, but never confrontational. Her message read, "Look, I don't want to get in the middle of things, but I feel like she's spiraling." She thought this would play out differently. I replied simply, "She's free to make any decision she wants. So am I." Then came the kicker. She told us this was just a test. She wanted to see how far you'd go to keep her. Liz said you'd beg. Kara said you'd crack. But you didn't. And now she's unraveling. I leaned back, absorbing the words. A test. That explained the confidence, the deliberate cruelty disguised as casual honesty. She had believed this entire move was a power play, a strategy, like withholding affection, brushing past connection, and calling it maturity. They framed it as empowerment. What they built together was less friendship and more a mutual encouragement to self-destruct in the name of proving control. And the irony? These women who had so much advice on how to escape commitment were now watching one of their own discover what freedom really costs. Later that evening, as I folded laundry, something we used to do together, I thought about the moment that exposed their illusion. It wasn't her walking out that ruined everything. It was the realization that she felt she could rehearse sincerity and perform love like a stage play, all while believing I'd stand front row, applauding. Rachel messaged again. "If I tell you something, can you promise not to say where it came from?" I typed back, "That depends on what you're about to say." She hesitated, then sent, "There's more. Kara told her to push you, to see how long you'd chase before breaking." But Liz suggested the line, the one she used that morning, word for word. I reread that sentence slowly. The comment that had launched everything, the one that sparked this transformation, was borrowed and crafted by someone else. My marriage wasn't ending because of truth or clarity. It was breaking over a script handed to her by a woman who treated relationships like chessboards. Rachel added, "She's crying a lot, but she says she can't back down, that it'd make her look weak. Kara and Liz keep telling her you'll come around eventually. Asterisk, they'll be disappointed." I sent back. She saw the message and never replied. That night, my phone buzzed again. This time it was her. "Why are you talking to Rachel?" No greeting. Just a sharp sentence complete with accusation. Defensive. Cracks forming. I replied, "I didn't reach out." She did. There was a pause. Then, "You're involving my friends now." I laughed under my breath. The irony of it all. The same circle that had turned her into someone who thought calculated distance equaled strength was now the barrier she wanted to keep me from stepping near. "You involved them the moment you let them script our marriage," I answered. Another long silence. Then came the predictable pivot. "This is getting toxic. We need to talk in person." She was trying to regain her footing. The shift was apparent. Discredit the exposure, claim victimhood, regain emotional ground. It was a strategy as old as time. What she couldn't predict was that I had no interest in replaying the act. The stage was empty now. The lights had dimmed. I powered down my phone and walked outside. The air was cool and crisp. I took a deep breath, letting it settle into my chest. This was about reflection, seeing the web from the outside, realizing I had been caught in a script for too long, and the pages were written by voices that had never once cared about the outcome beyond their entertainment. The following morning, I received a voicemail. She sounded shaky. I just want to talk without all these outside influences. Just us. Please. But we'd already passed that point. Just us had stopped being a concept the moment she let her committee take the reins of her personal life. I deleted the voicemail and opened my laptop. If she wanted to talk, she'd have to step out of that circle entirely. Because the following conversation wouldn't be about comfort, it would be about accountability. By Thursday, she switched tactics. Gone were the terse messages. In came longer texts wrapped in soft nostalgia, memories, half-hearted jokes, little callbacks to better days. She even referenced a coffee shop we hadn't visited in over a year, as if reminding me of past routines could serve as a reset button. I read every word with a clear mind, the emotional fog that once clouded my judgment entirely gone. Maybe we should talk over lunch? Neutral ground? I didn't respond right away. I let the message sit there, unread, for hours. When I finally opened it, I typed, "What exactly do you want to discuss?" Her reply came instantly. "Us. How did this all get so out of hand? Face to face. Just an honest conversation." It struck me how quickly the language had shifted. From "you're lucky I haven't walked out" to "this got out of hand." She had begun stepping back from her words like they'd been written by someone else. Maybe they had, figuratively speaking. Liz's voice still echoed behind those texts. I agreed to meet. Saturday, 11:30 a.m., a small cafe between her workplace and mine. When I arrived, she was already seated, fidgeting with her sleeves. Her expression was measured, trying to appear calm while scanning my face for signs. Worry, hurt, resentment, any lingering emotion she could anchor herself to. "Thanks for coming," she started, tone almost rehearsed. I nodded. "You asked." She took a breath, clearly hoping I'd offer more. I didn't. I've been thinking about everything. About the way things escalated. Maybe it was poor advice. Perhaps I misread things. That was the closest thing to accountability I'd heard from her in months, though the wording carefully avoided admitting fault. "Maybe," I asked, raising an eyebrow. Her eyes dropped for a second. "Okay, probably. But I want to fix this." I leaned forward slightly. "Why now?" The question rattled her. She blinked once, then again, lips parting like she was still crafting an answer. "I guess. I didn't expect silence from you. I thought you'd try harder." There it was. "You mean beg?" Her shoulders stiffened. "I mean fight. Show me you cared." I sipped my coffee before responding. "You expected desperation. That's what Liz and Kara told you would happen. That I'd crawl through the debris of your emotional experiment, hoping to be let back in." Her expression hardened. "I never said it was an experiment. You didn't have to." We sat in silence for a few moments. Then she tried again. "Look, I said some things that sounded harsh." They didn't sound harsh. They were. She swallowed, struggling to recalibrate. This version of me, measured, calm, unmoved, wasn't part of the outcome she'd envisioned. "This is the part where you say something like, 'I miss you too,'" she tried, a nervous laugh punctuating her sentence. "I miss the version of you that existed before she started taking relationship cues from divorcees who enjoy chaos." That shut her up for a moment. Her jaw tensed. She stirred her tea absently, eyes darting to the window. "I didn't realize how far things had gone until I couldn't feel you anymore," she whispered. "I kept thinking it would turn into a fight, and somehow we'd reset." I nodded slowly. "You wanted to burn the bridge and assume I'd rebuild it." She said nothing. We parted shortly after. No tears, just a quiet, mutual understanding that the air between us had changed in ways conversation couldn't undo. That night, I went to a gallery opening downtown. An old friend had invited me, someone I hadn't seen in years, but always got along with. Her name was Elise. We met in college, dated briefly before life pushed us in different directions. The moment I stepped into the space and saw her near a painting she'd curated, something in my chest shifted. It wasn't love. It was recognition. She greeted me warmly, genuinely surprised. We talked for over an hour, flowing effortlessly from art to life to memories that didn't hurt to revisit. There were no expectations in her eyes. When I returned home, I found another message waiting. "Are you free tomorrow? I was thinking maybe we could cook dinner together like we used to." I stared at it for a while, debating. I typed, "I have plans." Her reply came instantly. "With whom?" I placed the phone face down and poured myself a drink. The next morning, another came. "You're seeing someone? Already?" No punctuation again. Just raw emotion bleeding through the screen. The mask was slipping. That Sunday afternoon, I bumped into Liz at a local bookstore. She was wearing sunglasses despite the overcast weather, clutching a leather tote and pretending to read something intellectual. When she spotted me, she gave a tight-lipped smile. "Well," she said, "you look unbothered." "I am." Her expression twitched, just slightly. "You're not going to regret throwing her away like that." I turned to her fully, matching her gaze without blinking. She set herself on fire to see if I'd come running with water. I walked out of the smoke. Liz didn't reply. She adjusted her bag and walked off, pretending she hadn't lost something in that moment. Back home, I deleted the thread of messages from my wife. Then I archived our wedding photos into a private folder labeled Lessons. They were reference points. It was the following Friday when she finally showed up, unannounced. I heard the knock while I was folding laundry upstairs, a rhythmic pattern, gentle at first, then firmer. By the time I reached the door and pulled it open, she stood there in a coat she used to wear to holidays with my family. Her eyes met mine, tired, unsure, almost rehearsed. I thought maybe we could talk. I stepped aside without speaking. She walked in slowly, scanning the room like she was searching for something familiar, something that would promise her this wasn't over. Her gaze paused on the empty shelf near the hallway where our wedding photo used to sit. That detail landed. I watched it register in her eyes. Still, she said nothing. We moved to the living room. She sat at the edge of the couch, legs crossed, hands clenched in her lap. The silence between us didn't stretch awkwardly. It settled naturally, like the air in a room long undisturbed. "I've made mistakes," she began, voice thin. I waited. I let outside voices influence me. I let pride control my reactions. I treated our marriage like it was optional instead of essential. "I assumed you'd always be waiting." She looked at me now, thoroughly. "But you weren't. And I get it. I do. I don't expect to walk in here and fix everything overnight. I just wanted to say I was wrong." She waited for more. An opening. A bridge. "I believed space would create longing," she continued. "I thought silence would make you fight harder. But it didn't." I stayed quiet. "And when you didn't chase, I panicked. Because it forced me to see how much of our bond relied on your willingness to forgive things I hadn't earned forgiveness for. I'm asking for one more chance. To rebuild. Slowly. Honestly." There was no trembling in her voice now. Just quiet desperation dressed up as accountability. The kind that feels sincere only after the consequences arrive. I leaned forward slightly, elbows on my knees. "You've said a lot. And I'm sure you believe every word right now." She flinched slightly. "But you didn't come here for a conversation. You came for redemption. And I'm not in the business of distributing that like candy." Her lips parted. No words came. A single act didn't break this marriage. It eroded over months. Your eyes stopped meeting mine. Your touch became reluctant. Your voice, when it addressed me, felt like it belonged to someone performing exhaustion, not connection. I rose from my chair. I used to believe we were worth preserving. That history counted for something. But what I've learned these past weeks is that history is only valuable when both people remember it the same way. She stood as well, a step behind me. "I remember." "You remember pieces," I said. "But the version of me who tolerated dismissal, silence, manipulation, that man is gone." She reached out instinctively, fingers grazing the edge of my sleeve. "I can show you I've changed." I looked down at her hand, then back into her eyes. "You changed the moment you believed your absence would elevate your worth. You gambled everything we built on the hope I'd crawl back through ashes. But when you returned, you found there was no fire left." I turned toward the hallway and motioned gently toward the door. She didn't move right away. Her eyes searched my face, looking for softness, maybe an old reflex she could count on. But I stood there, steady, no longer someone holding out hope. Eventually, she picked up her bag and walked toward the door. Her hand hesitated on the knob. Then she turned. "This isn't who I thought you were." "No," I said. "It's who I've finally become." She left without another word. The door clicked shut behind her. I stood there for a moment, staring at the space she had occupied. And then, like flipping a switch, I exhaled. A full breath, deeper than any I'd taken in months. Later that evening, Elise texted, "Want to grab coffee tomorrow?" I smiled. Nothing rushed, just a message from someone who asked with presence, not performance. "Sounds good," I replied. And just like that, life moved forward.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.